Good evening. On behalf of Superintendent Marion O'Donnell, Morgan Principal Carrie Hagnes, and the Morgan Political Club, welcome to tonight's 2016 Connecticut District 35 General Assembly and Connecticut District 33 State Senate debates at the new Morgan School Auditorium. We hope you are impressed with this facility that showcases our school and our community. I'm Wyatt Rue, and this is Dan Radka. We will act as moderators for tonight's debates. Other student participants include Liam Gordon, Sarah Auletta, James Saturno, Ashlyn Harris, and Olivia Silver. At this time, I'd like you to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd also like to point out fire exits in case of emergency in the back left and the back right of the auditorium, as well as those to my left and my right. As for rules and format, the debates will begin with a 2-minute opening statement from each of our participants. Straws were drawn earlier to determine the order. From here, we will ask candidates a variety of district-related questions. These questions will allow the candidates 90 seconds to respond and afford a 1-minute rebuttal time if necessary. At the end of the debate, each candidate will then have the opportunity to give a 90-second closing statement. While audience participation such as applause is permitted, we ask that you remain respectful to the candidates who have graciously volunteered their time to come before you in an honest and open setting.
The Morgan Political Club was founded in 2005 with a mission to provide students with a non-judgmental environment in which members can debate and explore options about political issues on the local, state, national, and international levels. Our members and guests meet every Tuesday after school, at which time speakers with varied political backgrounds come to speak and expose students to a variety of political perspectives. All views are welcomed, all views are respected. We believe that the exchange of ideas is vital to a healthy and vibrant democracy. We also host events such as this, and we are excited and humbled to have the opportunity to facilitate open political discussion and debate within our new school walls. Our questions will cover a large variety of topics, and we ask that the candidates remain on message and sufficiently answer each question.
If you have specific questions for any one candidate, you can visit us after the debate in the lobby for an informal meet and greet. We would like to thank our candidates for coming tonight: Republican Jesse MacLachlan, Democrat Ellen Dahlgren, and Libertarian Austin Coco. And now for our first question from Daniel Radka.
As a representative in the State House, you will be tasked with working with others to balance the state budget. All 4 of you agree that taxes should not be raised and services should not be cut. Rather, our tax base must grow in order to erase the current deficit. If you are all proposing relatively similar ideas, how is your specific approach different or more effective than those of your opponents? And Ellen will start, and we'll move down the line.
Scratch that. So the candidates are now going to offer their 2-minute opening statements. And again, we'll start with Ellen at the end.
I want to thank Mr. Barron.
Would you mind using the microphone? Thank you.
I wanted to thank Mr. Eric Bergman and the entire Morgan Political Club for hosting this debate, which has become a tradition among the local candidates here in Clinton. I look forward to a vigorous debate with my opponents in this race. Since the beginning of this race, I have taken the view that we really are conducting a contest that's for the kids, for the long term. I'm trying to take the long view in the entire campaign. And when I say that I think that this is for the kids and for the future, I don't mean just education and the services that our young people need today. I'm also looking for taking the long view towards our economy, because it's necessary to provide these young people with the kinds of jobs that they want in 5 or 10 or 15 years. We also need to take the long view in terms of protecting our environment, because that is what we are leaving for our kids as well. We need to take the long view. And I think that for that particular for those reasons, because it's necessary to take the long view, because that's the appropriate way to be approaching the challenges that are facing the state. I think it's extremely appropriate that it be our young people who have brought us together to debate tonight. And I guess this is the 30-second mark. And again, I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you in this forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. And now we'll have Austin.
Hello, thank you all for coming. I'd like to thank the Morgan Political Club for hosting this debate. I'm running because, frankly, I'm concerned about the future of Connecticut, as I'm sure my opponents are as well. However, I, like almost half of this district and over 40% of the state, reject the notion that you have to be a Republican or a Democrat, and I'm actively trying to work to push a voting system. Sorry, I'm actively trying to push a voting system that is democratic for everyone, not just these two major parties. I think that is the biggest issue that not just our state, but all states and at the national level, we all suffer from. We suffer from this lack of different ideas, and first and foremost, I would like to push ranked choice voting in our state. Second of all, I think, again, I would agree with Ms. Dahlgren that we do need to take the long road, but we cannot abandon the short road. And the short road is showing that people are leaving the state by the thousands, and if that trend continues, we're not going to have a long road. And that, as someone who's been born here, who's spent 21 years of his life here, that really concerns me. I want to run to promote the ideas of being, socially tolerant without sacrificing fiscal responsibility, which I feel most people in this district and in this state can agree with, at least to some degree. Thank you.
And now, Jesse, thank you.
Thank you so much, and I want to thank the Morgan Political Club for having us here and hosting another debate. It's always a joy to be with you all. Thank you, all of you who have come to engage in the political process with us this evening. My name is Jesse MacLachlan, and I'm the state representative for the 35th District, the towns of Westbrook, Clinton, and Killingworth. And it has been a joy to serve the community that I grew up in, the community that raised me, and the community that I now have the opportunity to serve as its legislator up in Hartford. It's been a joy to partner with many of you here in local initiatives to make our towns a better place to live. I'm running for re-election because I believe that Hartford needs more of our small town values. Connecticut's a great place to live. It's a great place to live because we do our job here in our small towns. We pass responsible budgets. We encourage participation and investment in our local economies. We look out for each other, for those who need our help. And my concern is, I believe Governor Dan Malloy has taken our state in the wrong direction. I have a record of proposing alternative budgets and proposals to encourage job growth in this state, to encourage young people to continue working in this state. And I'm asking for your consideration to put me back to work for you all, to continue offering solutions and alternatives to make Connecticut a more affordable and economically robust place to live. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. And now, our first question from Daniel Radka.
As a representative in the State House, you will be tasked with working with others to balance the state budget. All four of you agree that taxes should not be raised and services should not be cut. Rather, our tax base must grow in order to erase the current deficit. If you are all proposing relatively similar ideas, how is your specific approach different or more effective than those of your opponents?
And this first question goes to Ellen.
Okay, thank you. I think that you're right, that we agree that the state budget is the foremost issue facing all of us, the thing that most of the voters are thinking the most about, the thing that's getting the most publicity throughout this campaign and this contest. I endorse the budget and the proposals that the House Democratic Caucus has put forward, and the main component of this is that we simply must grow jobs and grow the economy in order to increase the base of our taxes. I think that we all have agreed that raising taxes is not a positive solution to the issue. We are very, very dependent upon income taxes paid by a rather small number of people in the state. 1 out of every 8 of our tax dollars comes from just 350 taxpayers, and these people have options. It's far too easy for them to leave. Growing the base is the only approach that's going to work. We need to have, investment in job development and advanced manufacturing is one of the best ways to do that. Promoting our small businesses, preserving our environment because of the economic importance of the environment in our coastal community where so much of our economic activity occurs.
Thank you, Ellen, and now we move to Austin.
Now, I think what Ellen said is correct. I think on the general ideas, we seem to agree, because I think we can all agree that, we really need to grow our tax base. I think where we really differ is the specific plan. My plan is that, first of all, we have the Long Island Sound. We can do so much, speaking as a marine biologist and an aquaculture student, we can do so much commercial aquaculture, shellfish aquaculture and kelp aquaculture that can help clean up the Long Island Sound while turning a profit for private businesses. We have the academics at UConn, Avery Point. We can form a group of academics, researchers, business interests, and policymakers to help grow aquaculture at a commercial level in our state and actually surpass Maine as one of the top aquaculture states in the US. I really believe that if we are willing to work for it, and if we're willing to take the advice of the industry and of the academics and of the research. On top of that, I also propose to encourage profit sharing to increase wages. We should offer a tax credit for profit sharing. Before all of this, however, I feel that we need to promote fiscal transparency and understand where our budget is going. And I would move as much money as I could out of the general fund and into specific special funds and pass strict lockbox amendments to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Austin. And now we move to Jesse.
Thank you for that question. I think you brought up two issues, one being bipartisanship and another being budget alternatives. And I'd like to address both. I've been very proud to join my colleagues to found with Representative Carney, who's here, and Senator Linares, who's also here with us, the Young Legislators Caucus. It's a bipartisan group of legislators, Democrats and Republicans, bicameral House members and senators. We're one of the very few in the entire country. And we meet regularly and we talk about the issues that nobody wants to talk about, that caucus chair people will not bring up. We bring them up because we're not afraid to dig into the issues and to share each other's ideas. And so I've been very proud of that, to have experience reaching out across the aisle. I was also very proud to have co-sponsored several bipartisan bills that passed the legislature that addressed issues like firefighters who are battling cancer and the rampant opioid crisis in this state. And I'd like to continue being part of additional bipartisan solutions. I have a record of opposing every single tax increase that has been put in front of me, because I believe in the past 6 years, under Governor Dan Malloy's leadership, that we've asked Connecticut taxpayers to contribute enough, and we need to exercise discipline. Now, what kind of discipline are we talking about? Now we're talking about budget reform. And these are how my ideas are different. I think we need to tackle our long-term debt. In this country, in this state, we are one of the most indebted per capita states in the entire country. We need to rein in long-term debt because those are future tax increases. We need to enforce a spending cap. We also need to enforce and create a defined contribution benefit plan for. Pardon?
You're out of time.
May I finish my sentence?
Yes, please finish.
We need to, thank you very much. We need to implement a defined contribution benefit package to make sure that hardworking state employees can count on a dependable retirement fund going forward. Thank you. Appreciate the extension.
Jesse. And now we will offer each of the candidates a 1-minute rebuttal if they would like one, starting with Ellen.
Representative MacLachlan has brought up the notion of the retirement benefits for current state employees, and I think everyone knows that our overarching debt with our legacy debt with the retirement system is one of the biggest problems that we do have. But if you take the debt for the retirement systems apart, you'll realize that the debt is actually due to our legacy cost before we started funding it. We're actually doing pretty well with funding current employees. We're above average with the states and among other states. in terms of funding current employees. So I think we're kind of looking at the wrong thing if we're talking about changing the retirement benefits for current employees.
Thank you, Ellen. Now we move to Austin.
I believe Representative MacLachlan, and with all due respect, sir, you mentioned a lot of bipartisanship. Now, as a third-party candidate, I've seen what a lot of bipartisanship can do. It basically, and one of the things it can easily do is force any opposition off of the ballot. I think we don't need bipartisanship. I would prefer nonpartisanship in these discussions and bringing in all kinds of ideas, regardless of party. And I don't believe Hartford is currently doing that, and that's what I would like to do, bring nonpartisanship. Also, with all due respect, you also mentioned that you voted no to every tax increase, most of which were, of course, likely sponsored by Democrats, I presume. That doesn't seem like bipartisanship, at least to me, with all due respect. Thank you.
Thank you, Austin.
Yeah, I'd like to address both comments and wrap up some of these points here. In terms of our pension obligations, we have $20 billion of long-term debt, $50 billion of retirement liabilities. Now, we did make good on our pension obligations this year. And on the other side of that, because those are non-discretionary spending items. Now, our discretionary spending items needed to be cut $900 million upwards this last budget season. Those were cuts to key services. The point I'm trying to make is, yes, when we have a contract for a defined benefit retirement platform, then we are contracted to make good on those payments. And when a deficit rolls around, you have to end up cutting services to those who need our help the most, DMIS, DDS, DSS. I think that's unacceptable. You know, our pension fund was budgeted for 8% returns, and we are seeing 0.35% returns. So it is broken. We need to be very honest about that. You know, if we don't get a hold of those long-term liabilities, then we are going to see future tax increases, and I voted no against every tax increase because I think we've asked enough, and I watched the governor's office twist arms to get his way, and I don't think that's I don't think that's democratic either.
Thank you, Jesse. We're now going to move on to the second question. Many people are leaving our state due to a high cost of living and few job opportunities. Last year, Connecticut experienced a population loss of 27,619 people, the fourth largest drop in the nation. What would you do to keep our population, especially younger generations, from leaving Connecticut, and what would you do to make more people want to move to our state? And this question is going to start with you, Jesse.
I like to say that a job solves a multitude of problems. We're seeing an exodus of young people from this state. We're also seeing folks on fixed income increasingly strained to afford the high cost of living in Connecticut. I hope that the General Electric's decision to move to Massachusetts was a wake-up call to all of us and to every single legislator in Hartford, because it's a clear signal that Connecticut is not, in fact, a friendly place to do business. There is red tape upon red tape, and we need to start looking and listening to business owners. Small business owners and large corporations alike. These are folks that work hard, and we are being employed by folks who are looking to other states to do business. We need to start listening to the business community. We need to start looking at other states and how we can be more competitive in our tax environment. Folks are moving and leaving to places like Massachusetts, which we used to call Taxachusetts. That needs to stop. I was able to, and honored to participate in legislation that would implement the Learn Here, Live Here bill. This is a bill for young people who have recently graduated from college, and to open up a first home buyer's account. We need to be creative. We need to look at ways to encourage entrepreneurship, and I was proud to sponsor the Entrepreneurs Learners Permit, and would love to continue proposing similar solutions.
Thank you, Jesse. Now, Ellen, your response?
Okay, so in terms of the business regulatory environment, I think that we can do a lot to simplify regulatory compliance without lowering the regulatory standards. The fact that a regulation is simple and straightforward does not mean that it's lax. When I had a long career in engineering. I dealt with regulatory authorities in many states as well as internationally. And I know that there are regulatory authorities that are streamlined to go through and regulatory authorities that are very complicated, and it has no relationship whatsoever to how safe the what's being regulated or how clean the result is. You can write and administer regulations well and have the effect that you want without making it, so very, very difficult. And unfortunately, Connecticut has one of the worst regulatory reputations, and the portions of it that I've seen, it's probably deserved. We need to simplify it. In terms of keeping elderly individuals or retired individuals here, I support the idea of removing the state tax on Social Security benefits. I think that would do quite a bit for at least lower income retirees. And it's an idea whose time has come. We're one of very few states that still tax Social Security benefits.
Thank you, Ellen. And Austin?
Thank you very much for asking that question, because as a younger person, I contemplated, after going to college, not coming back here. And honestly, the reason why I'm running is because I want to make this last-ditch effort to try to help fix this state and make it available for young people again. That's one of the main reasons why I'm running. I think to do that, we should be investing, and not necessarily investing, but looking to some of these new industries that are popping up. Aquaculture, again, being one of them, and I'm partial to that, of course, because that's what I'm training in, what I've been doing work in for years. By addressing that as a means to create jobs, allowing more people to do aquaculture commercially in the Long Island Sound, for example, I think we could draw a lot of new people in. Look at all kinds of new industries. People are getting degrees in engineering and this hard sciences, and if we can appeal to that, I think we can bring young people back into the state. Again, the tax incentives for profit sharing, where if we allow $1.15 for every $1 a business spends in profit sharing, without raising the minimum wage, I think we can increase wages that people are given. It's a tax incentive to reduce our taxes while increasing the wage, and it's up to the private business whether or not they take it. I think that's a great idea and a great way to improve our economy and our economic standing so people can afford to live here again. Thank you.
Thank you, Austin. And now we will offer each of the candidates 1 minute rebuttal, starting with Jesse.
Sure. So, I proposed legislation my first term to remove and exempt folks on Social Security from paying income tax on their Social Security because folks living on fixed income, as I mentioned earlier, are stretched to afford to live here, who are worried they won't be able to watch their grandkids grow up. And I don't think that's right. I feel like we need to make a Connecticut that's affordable for everyone. I think we need to implement a cap on property tax assessments so that seniors can plan accordingly and not be forced out of their home or worse. In Connecticut, farmers across the state are being increasingly stretched to pass on and keep family land that they've held for generations when the landowner passes away. Farmland needs to be exempt from the estate tax because it's being lost, and that's land that goes directly to feeding Connecticut families, and we need to address that as well. And I was proud to submit legislation that would address that matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. Now we move to Ellen.
Addressing Austin's point to some extent, another component of the Democratic platform is a suspension of the state income tax for new college graduates who locate in Connecticut. This would make it easier for our businesses to recruit new college graduates to start their career here. It would be a 4-year phased-in exemption from the taxes, 100% the first year, phasing out over 4 years. But it helps with students who have some loans. It helps get people established here. It makes it easier for the businesses, which are recruiting people now, Electric Boat, Pratt Whitney, Sikorsky. It's one thing that they can tell the young people that they're trying to bring into the state to start their career here.
Thank you, Ellen. Austin?
Well, I think, again, part of the issue is not necessarily just the jobs issue for young people, to respond to what's been mentioned, because I know we all talked a lot about jobs. I think it's also the fact that young people don't feel like they're represented necessarily, that their ideas are not represented. And that's an issue with not just our jobs, but also the fact that, we have people who are serving in office for 10, 20, 30 years in some cases. And young people, after 30 years, young people do not identify with these older people that have been around since they were born, since 15 years before they were born, no offense. I think we need term limits, frankly, in elected offices so that we can get new blood in, get new ideas in, get new people in that can represent these younger people. Thank you.
Thank you, Austin. Our next question is about election reform. I know, Austin, you touched on this a little bit in your opening statement. Our current electing process, in which, quote, the winner takes all, makes it very difficult for members of third parties to get elected. Election reform, such as the introduction of runoff voting at the state level, could potentially change this. This type of reform would allow voters to rank their desired candidates in a list from their most to least desired candidate. A single candidate would need more than 50% of the vote to win. Currently, this has been implemented in statewide elections in places such as North Carolina. Do you agree or disagree with these reforms? Are they more or less representative of voters? And this first question goes to Austin.
Ranked choice voting and instant runoff voting are the exact same thing, and I fully support it. I think, like I mentioned in my introduction, when almost half of the voters in this district and over 40% in our state are not represented by Democrats or Republicans, we need other options. And by having ranked choice voting, it stops people like me and like Ian, who unfortunately may not be making it. It helps us not be necessarily the spoiler candidate in an election. It makes us a viable option, because if you would like me, then Ian, then Jesse, then Ellen, you can rank your choices in order of preference, and that, again, you need at least half of the vote to be elected. You can't have something like what happens in Maine, where a governor gets elected with 40% of the vote. I think it's a great system, and I think it would go along well with instituting recall elections of elected officials at the state level and term limits. I think those three reforms are things we all need to have our democracy at the state level more representative of the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Austin. Jesse?
Sure, thank you. When we think about trying to represent the mosaic of political views that are representative of our communities, of our state, I'm supportive of any discussion that creates a more open democracy. I can't commit to supporting ranked choice voting now. I don't know enough about it and how it works. But I can tell you that there are folks up in Hartford that have served there for longer than I've been alive. And I think it's important to remember that public service should be just that. It should be a contribution that someone makes and not a career path. And you know, I think we should, and I would support term limits. I think that would be healthy for our democracy. I'd love to be part of that discussion.
Thank you. Ellen?
Well, the runoff voting system that Austin is talking about is actually, I believe, on the ballot in Maine this year. And it's no surprise that Maine would think it was a good idea after what happened in their gubernatorial election. I think that we should all be paying very close attention, watching what happens there, whether the initiative is successful. I believe that it actually is polling well and may very well pass. So we'll have the opportunity to view Maine as a genuine laboratory of democracy and see how this works out in a nearby state. I'm open to the idea. Let's see how it works out nearby.
And I would like to offer a rebuttal to any candidates. Austin?
Yes, going to school in Maine, I can tell you right now a bit about their question 5, which is the ranked choice voting bill. That is favored by, I believe, about half, and about a quarter of Maine doesn't know enough about it, which, c'est la vie, kind of how it works. To address what ranked choice voting is, again, you get to rank in order of preference your candidates. So you have your first choice, instead of just circling a bubble, you put in your first choice, your second choice, your third choice, your fourth choice. If no one gets 50%, then whoever gets the least amount of votes is then eliminated from the ballot, and all the votes for that person go to the person's second choice, and so on and so forth until someone gets at least 50%. Now, unlike my opponents, this is probably the first thing that I would propose in the next legislative session. I think it's a great idea, and even though we haven't seen it tested out on a state level, it's something we sorely need. Thank you.
Thank you, Austin. Jesse?
Sure. So, I'm vaguely familiar with the way some European countries like Germany conduct their elections. There are a multitude of parties. It facilitates conversation and compromise among parties to come together find middle ground on certain platforms, and I think we certainly need more of that because Connecticut has been experiencing one-party rule for decades. We haven't had a legislature, a balanced legislature, in over 40 years. And so if you want to talk about parity and equal representation in the legislature, we need to talk about ending one-party rule in Connecticut. That's one of the reasons why I would ask for your vote, because I believe I've conducted myself in a bipartisan way and have represented this district and have stood up to what I feel are the reckless policies of a bully governor and Governor Malloy. And I'd like to continue doing that work on your behalf. And again, I would certainly support term limits, and I'm open to the discussion that makes for a more transparent democracy.
Thank you, Jesse. Moving on to our next question. Connecticut is faced with many environmental issues, including an unhealthy and polluted Long Island Sound, issues with brownfields or contaminated sites, such as the Unilever factory here in Clinton, and a dependence on natural gas and petroleum. In your opinion, what is the #1 environmental issue facing our state, and what will you do to mitigate it? This first question goes to Ellen.
Part of that I didn't hear, but I know that you're addressing the question concerns the most important environmental issues. Is that correct?
Yes, and
Okay.
what would you do to mitigate it?
Well, I think that the first thing to realize is that protecting our environment and growing our economy are not two separate issues. That protecting the environment, especially here in a coastal area where we have so many marine-dependent industries, perhaps not yet including the ones that Austin is talking about, but we definitely have the marinas, the fisheries, the sport fisheries as well. The oysters are coming back. Protecting the environment is clearly an economic issue. And it's a real hit to tourism when the beaches have to be closed, for example, because of the contamination. So we need to get away from the mindset of thinking that protecting the environment and growing the economy are two different things. They really are not. It's the same thing. We have seen enormous advances, particularly nearby in Rhode Island, for example, with reclamation of brownfields. I think that that may be one of the things that we could do the best with, at least here locally. It's not just the Unilever site, it's the other site, slips my mind, but where the propane was going to go, that definitely needs to be remediated. We should take a good look at the way that Rhode Island has handled some of this. It would be a boon to us.
Thank you, Ellen. Now, Austin.
Now, again, and I'm sure you're going to get sick and tired of me talking about this all the time, but this is a job, I think, in the Long Island Sound especially, where we can look at aquaculture as a way, specifically shellfish aquaculture and kelp aquaculture, to help reclaim the Long Island Sound and help clean it up. Speaking as someone who studies this in college, I think it's a great way. Basically how a lot of shellfish work, they will take in certain excess nutrients that we get from runoff, and they will grow off of that. They will use that for food. To put them in the Long Island Sound and it's been shown when you put them in a body of water that's polluted, specifically oysters, they will clean up the body of water. If we can do that while having private companies who do that, sell those oysters for a profit, I think, again, what Ms. Dahlgren was talking about, we would be both growing the economy while promoting environmental protection. And I think we can take that route to a lot of different avenues. As well as that, I would like to allow for more local government intervention on lands, allow local governments to assist in funding if they so choose some of our state lands to help take some pressure off at the state level to again reduce some of our taxes while not limiting environmental protection. Thank you.
Thank you, Austin. Now, Jesse.
Thank you for that question. And I was happy to co-sponsor legislation that create a framework and a long-term plan to improve the well-being of Long Island Sound. I agree with Ellen's sentiment that we are a tourist economy. You know, I've traveled and I've been as far east as Shanghai, and I can't tell you that there's a more beautiful place that I've seen than the lower Connecticut River Valley. And people travel far and wide to experience what we call our everyday lives. I was happy to co-sponsor legislation that banned microbeads. These are pieces of plastic that get in the water system and end up killing our wildlife, killing fish. And I know we must have a handful of outdoors people here among us this very evening. It's part of our way of life. I think we need to, we covered this in a recent forum, we need to allow DEEP and actually enforce DEEP to create technical standards for alternative wastewater treatments. I think wastewater in this community is probably the #1 environmental issue that we need to tackle. We also need to consider open space and the place that open space has in our community. We are host to acres and acres of beautiful forest, Chatfield Hollow State Park. I was proud in the budget that I proposed and my amendments that I supported that restored funding to the Community Investment Act, which protected open space. That is a dedicated fund. And I think that should be a priority in the upcoming budget negotiations. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse.
We'll now offer a 1-minute rebuttal to any candidates who would like to, starting with Ellen.
Yeah, I concur with the notion that we need to prod DEP by some means to come forward with the standards for the alternative waste treatment. Unfortunately, this is not the only area in which the legislature has passed requirements that standards be written, that regulations be written, and that they are not produced, not happening. I think that the legislature needs to take some initiative here, passing the regulations with a date certain, perhaps even providing, if another state has similar laws, similar regs, that those will go into effect until such time as Connecticut writes its own. The legislature has to take the initiative to make sure the regs happen.
Thank you, Ellen. Austin?
Now, speaking as someone who has who's getting a background in marine biology and oceanography, even if we immediately stop all dumping in the Long Island Sound, due to the fact of the massive flush time of the Long Island Sound, flush time being basically how long it takes for pollutants in the Long Island Sound to leave the Long Island Sound, the flush time is ridiculously high. We can't reasonably expect that just by stopping, we're going to get rid of everything. And again, I think we need to look at remediation processes, and I think, again, to harp on the point, aquaculture is one of the best ways that I can think of to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Austin. Jesse?
Yeah, appreciate that. I think we need to be honest about the current budget process in Hartford. I don't know if there's a better way to put it, to describe how Governor Malloy's administration oversees the budget than Peter being robbed to pay Paul. When you pay gas taxes, those are supposed to go into special transportation fund to pay for roads. The Community Investment Act, similarly, is a self-funded, dedicated funded program. And when we ran into a deficit this year, my colleagues across the aisle, under the great duress being directed to them by Governor Malloy, passed a budget that robbed that fund. And those are dollars that go back into the community to make sure that open space is protected, that farmland is protected, and that our natural resources are preserved for not just us, but in the long term for future generations. And so I'd ask that that be addressed as well in future budget negotiations.
Thank you, Jesse. For our next question. As of 2016, Connecticut has a poverty rate of 10.5 and an unemployment rate of 5.4. What specifically would you do to eliminate poverty and create new job opportunities in the state? Why is this plan more effective than the plans of your opponents? And we're going to start with Jesse.
Sure, and I made this point earlier. Well, first and foremost, the unemployment rate doesn't include all the folks who have just stopped looking for work altogether. And so I think everyone is concerned about how difficult it is to find a job. I can't tell you how many folks I've talked to at their door whose sons and daughters are now moving out of state. They're taking their engineering degree and they're going to New Hampshire, or they're going to New York, or they're going to Massachusetts. And my first term, I was happy to co-sponsor legislation with a Democrat colleague across the aisle that would preserve the angel investment tax credit. Now, one of the major drivers of our economy that we need to focus on is that in emerging technologies. We have institutions of higher learning, such as Yale University, and they're seeing a growth of tech startups. And we need to do more to make sure that those companies have access to capital. One of those mechanisms that we use is the angel investment tax credit. An investor can direct money into a startup and then save money for themselves. And it's a way where you grow the pie. You need more people to win. And I'm afraid that in Hartford, that place operates in a zero-sum game. Many people can win, and I think the folks that we really need to be sure that we're addressing are those who are participating in the growing in the tech industry. One of the reasons GE left is because Jeff Immelt wanted to walk outside at Boston Seaport and be in the midst of the most exciting place of human capital to be in the country, and we need to do a better job at emulating that.
Thank you, Jesse. Now it goes to Ellen.
Definitely growing jobs in the tech sector is an important way of growing the economy, retaining young people, and eventually reducing poverty. The state has made a major commitment in advanced manufacturing in terms of mechanical engineering technology. We have not made a commitment in biotech. We are bringing Charles River into the state, but we don't have the same kind of commitment towards bringing along the people who can work in that. I had a very long career in biochemical engineering. I know what's involved. In all of those years, I'm afraid that I never had the opportunity to hire someone out of UConn because the program simply is not taught there. So we definitely should be increasing our education in that area. That doesn't address poverty quite so much. I think we need to look at a real commitment towards our tax code, towards increasing our earned income tax credit in the state to help support those people who are the working poor and bring them up a little bit off the bottom where they really are right now.
Thank you, Ellen. Austin?
Yes, I think, again, to address the poverty question, I think, again, as I said earlier in this debate, discussing an idea of enacting tax credits for businesses for profit, to encourage them to profit share, I think that is a way to allow the business to choose, without having to mandate it, a way to increase wages in our state. I think that's a great way to kind of jumpstart the ball on that. I think, as well as Representative MacLachlan mentioned a few questions back, that we have red tape upon red tape that really just makes it a very harsh place to start a business or continue your business. And I think we do need to look at this red tape, and as Ms. Dahlgren said and Mr. MacLachlan said, we need to, streamline and or remove some of this red tape that is not effective for our state. Thank you.
Thank you, Austin. Jesse?
One thing I've learned is that vocational education in this state has sort of become higher education's stepchild. And that is a pathway. VoTech is a pathway to great, meaningful work in high-tech jobs, and we need to spend and give that aspect of higher education more attention. I was able to, along with Representative Carney, pass legislation to allow in-state students who are receiving in-state tuition to refinance their student loans at a lower interest rate. I would support the earned income tax credit as an alternative to raising the minimum wage. That way you hold businesses harmless and you give folks who need it the hand up that they need. I think as a whole, when we budget responsibly, when we pass budgets that stay balanced, we're not forced to come back halfway through the year and make cuts to the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. We're not forced to make cuts to the Department of Social Services. These were cuts that I couldn't support because I felt like we were balancing the budget on the backs of folks who need our help the most. So I'm running because I believe that the 5-year budget that I've proposed, that I have a record of advocating for, is a responsible one. And once we get our state finances under control, we can encourage job growth, we can peg our corporate tax rate to surrounding states to remain competitive, and we can make sure that those who need our help the most get it.
Thank you, Jesse. And Ellen? This is a rebuttal.
Just to echo once again the notion that we can certainly streamline regulations and regulatory compliance without decreasing standards. No one wants to pollute the water or the air. No one wants to compromise the public health. No one wants an unsafe workplace. But we don't need to make the regulatory compliance in the state as tough as it is. I've dealt with regulatory authorities in at least half the states, in most European countries, and in Japan. And it's tough here, and it doesn't need to be quite so tough. You still can get the protection that we need and want without the compliance being as awful as it is.
Thank you. And Austin.
I think, besides just streamlining the regulations, I think there are some regulations and prohibitions that we do need to seriously look at in our state, and I know I didn't mention it before, but I think a lot of industries are unfairly prohibited and blocked in the sense of, for no good reason other than for historic reasons, historic prejudices, and we need to take a serious look at what we're banning in our state, why other states are no longer banning it, what other states are no longer banning it, and what it's doing for those states as a way to encourage job growth and decrease poverty and legitimize businesses that frankly already exist in our state, whether or not we agree with those businesses existing in our state, whether or not they're legally in our state. Thank you.
Thank you, Austin. Moving on to our next question. In addition to the very high-profile GE headquarters move to Boston, many smaller, well-established companies have also left our state after years of business. What would you do to keep businesses in Connecticut and make our state an attractive place to start a business? We start with Austin.
Well, I think for starters, we need to look at why these businesses are leaving our state. And I think, again, as Representative MacLachlan pointed out, we're losing a lot of these businesses because there's sort of a brain drain going on. And it's really creating this sort of endless cycle in which young people like myself can't see a future in our state, so they're leaving. So these businesses can't hire educated young people, so they're leaving, and back and forth and back and forth. I think what I was saying with aquaculture before, I know to harp on it, but to create a community of best business interests, academia, and research, and I think we can create, and policy of course, and I think we can create that not just with aquaculture, but with other groups as well, to sort of reverse that downward spiral and maybe getting it going upwards again. I think that's really the way we can do it, with less or no government involvement in causing more and more regulation. I think that's the way to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Austin. Jesse?
Thank you. I think that small businesses in this state are looking for stability. They want to know that that the state halfway through the year isn't going to come back to them asking for them to contribute more. So I think if we can start passing balanced budgets, we can offer a sense of stability and predictability to small businesses. In the state of Connecticut, this might drive you crazy, the Appropriations Committee meets first and says, this is how much we're going to spend. And then they give that number to the Finance Committee and they say, figure out a way to pay for it. Now, what household possibly would ever operate that way? That means you might be spending the last few months living off your credit card, and that's what you've been doing. Either that, bonding, or raising taxes on businesses and hardworking people. I think we need to prioritize infrastructure. I proposed a package with a lot of my colleagues to, over the next 30 years, invest $50 billion of capital into bringing our roads and bridges and rail up to code, because it is an economic driver, and we need to focus on it. The jobs of the future are being ignored in Connecticut. In my first year, I proposed a study to have the Department of Economic and Community Development look at places like Austin, Texas, who are seeing massive growth in innovative industries. We need to be looking at ways to partner with municipalities and with businesses, the way that Boston has, to encourage entrepreneurship in the state. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. Now, Ellen, your response?
Many young people these days want a more urban environment in which to live, more urban than what Connecticut offers. In the earlier discussion, and I forget which of the others brought it up, the notion that part of the reason that GE chose Boston was the fact that they could walk outside and be in this very exciting environment. Our cities are small in this state, and we need to encourage partnerships with cities and suburbs to make all of this the vibrant community that young people want to live in. The notion of transit-oriented development is part of this. The fact that we have transit here and that we have communities along the rail lines, we can have something of a linear city, a linear transit-oriented kind of environment that also can be vibrant with the sorts of services and the like that young people are looking for. Tax incentives to bring in businesses. Right now, we're beginning to see some growth. I mean, Electric Boat is recruiting. Pratt & Whitney is bringing in young people. These will be engineering jobs. We need to also look to the industries of the future. I mentioned biotech before. We are not educating in that field.
Thank you, Ellen. And Austin, if you'd like a rebuttal.
Yeah, I think, again, I agree with the fact that we need to do a bit more recruiting in certain areas of more cutting-edge businesses. But again, I think we need to look at creating these networks and maintaining these networks between the industry and the educational system to help people get a job right out of college in one of these new industries that are coming to Connecticut. While yes, we are experiencing some growth, it's very little growth compared to most other states, as far as I understand. And that's really concerning for me as a younger person, and I'm sure for a lot of other people, that we're not seeing the growth that we are predicting. And again, I think networking is the easiest way we could get that done.
Thank you, Austin. Jesse?
I'd like to agree with Austin, and he made an excellent point that Connecticut has not recovered in terms of its job growth from pre-recession levels. So we have a lot of work to do. In our community, we are driven in large part by the marine trades. I think we need to look to states like Rhode Island and peg all taxes related to the marine trades to Rhode Island and incentivize folks to register their boats here, to have all of their work done on their boats here. It's a part of our economy. And right now, we are losing out to that kind of business in many ways to Rhode Island. And along the marine, and staying within the marine trade industry, we need to make sure we are well represented in the Connecticut Port Authority. Dredging is a very important issue. Representative Carney has done an excellent job on the Environment Committee, making sure that we are acknowledged. When the Port Authority is created, I promise to be a very strong voice, making sure that our needs are voiced.
Thank you, Jesse. Ellen?
The Connecticut Port Authority is very, very new. I think that their executive director may have been on the job for a full month now. But they are indeed taking over all of the dredging responsibility here on the Connecticut shore of the Long Island Sound. I was very happy back early in August to stand with Representative Courtney and most of the legislators from southeastern Connecticut in support of the Eastern Long Island dredge disposal site, which we're getting a lot of pushback from the state of New York on this, but it's absolutely necessary in order to keep our harbors and our rivers on the Connecticut side clean and passable. We have very different problems in Connecticut than New York does. We're part of the North American mainland, whereas Long Island Sound is is all sand and doesn't have any rivers. So we need to have our voice heard in terms of the dredging and the way that it's conducted.
Thank you, Ellen. We would now like to allow the candidates their 2-minute closing statements, starting with you, Ellen. You're up again.
Well, we've covered a number of things here, and the recurring theme seems to be Connecticut getting our economy going again. How are we going to approach our tax situation? How are we going to approach our legacy debt over our retirement system? We've heard about a lot of people leaving the state. We hear phrases like downward spiral. We talk about a lot of negatives in terms of the state, people leaving, people not wanting to come in here. I'd like to make the point that, I still think we're a great state. We have, a lot going for us here in Connecticut. We have an excellent, K-12 education system. The University of Connecticut is punching way above its weight in terms of quality. It's recognized as the academic equivalent of state universities that are sponsored by, that have the resources of much, much larger states. We have a lot of we have a good entrepreneurial spirit here. We have a lot of managerial talent. And that doesn't even approach the great natural beauty that we have in the state. This is a great place to live. We have some problems to be solved in terms of our budget, but by all means, all measures of social welfare in terms of things like a low poverty rate, a low crime rate, a high school graduation rate. This is a good state. There are many things that we do very, very well, and that we are the envy of other states. So let's look at the good, not just the bad.
Now going to Austin.
Yes, I think we've heard very diverse viewpoints and very different ideas here, and I'd like to say, not just as a candidate, but as a person, that I have a great respect for everyone that's currently running, that everyone, I think, has done a great job and is an example of the kind of citizens we need in our community at all levels. Great people who are very concerned about the community. We may have different ways to solve the issues, but I think we're all running for the same reason, because we're legitimately concerned with how our state is being run, with how our state is going, and we have a vision for the future of Connecticut. I just hope that my vision is the vision you want representing you in Hartford. Thank you.
Jesse.
Thank you again for hosting this debate. It's an honor to be here with you all. It's probably been the greatest honor of my life to be the voice for the community that raised me, that I grew up in, and I just want to say how honored I've been and to have been your voice in Hartford. Connecticut is a great place to live, and it's facing some serious challenges in the days ahead. We have $1.2 billion deficit in the next year, followed by a $1.4 billion deficit. We are seeing very large employers and very small employers choose other states to live. I think we need to take decisive action to make Connecticut a great place to do business and a more affordable place to live. I'm running for re-election because I believe Connecticut can be the best place to do business, the best place to raise a family, and the best place to retire. I'm asking for your consideration on Election Day to send me back to Hartford for another 2 years. I'm ready and willing to stand up to Governor Malloy when necessary, and even members of my own party, if it means that I'm representing your voice in Hartford. It would be an honor to continue serving you. Thank you for coming here this evening, and I look forward to speaking to many of you after we're all done here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jesse, and we'd like to thank all of the candidates for coming out tonight, coming out and participating. It's great to have the open and honest discussion that we do. Now, we are going to have about a 10-minute break, and then we will start the state senate debate. So if you would like to stay for that, please feel free. Thank you.